If we are really being honest, in the back of our mind, most of us believe that self-compassion will make us weak or less motivated, maybe even less moral. It's almost like we think we need our inner drill sergeant to get us going and whip us into shape. But is that true? Does harshness actually work better than care? Let's talk about it. Are there any drawbacks to being compassionate with ourselves? I'm going to answer that question by going over the top 6 myths our culture holds around self-compassion and then revealing what the research has to say. This research was done largely by Kristin Neff, who is the predominant researcher on self-compassion. She talks about compassion in general as the desire to end someone's suffering. But her simple definition of self-compassion is treating yourself as you would treat a friend. So I'm really channeling Kristin Neff today and sort of her myth-busting around self-compassion. So myth number 1, self-compassion is narcissistic. This is an interesting myth or fear. Often we worry that if we really deeply love and care for ourselves, we will become self-preoccupied or arrogant, maybe even narcissistic. But the truth is, self-compassion is not about having high regard for oneself or feeling superior or proud. In some ways, just the opposite. It's giving ourselves permission to be human from a belief that all people deserve compassion and tenderness. Just feel this for a moment. If we think we're all perfect and untouchable, then we don't need compassion. But the very act of giving ourselves compassion is an acknowledgement that it is hard to be human, that we aren't gods, and that we struggle and need support. So in my mind, self-compassion is actually a pivot away from narcissism towards something much deeper. In fact, for anyone who has studied narcissism, they will tell you too much self-love is not what fuels narcissism. If you look beneath narcissism, what you actually find is a tremendous amount of shame. So in many ways, you could think of self-compassion not as a cause of narcissism, but more as its cure. The bottom line is that self-compassion is not the same as arrogance or even self-esteem for that matter, though that's a topic for another video. Myth number 2, self-compassion is too easy. It's sort of a soft thing and therefore will make us weak. Some people believe because self-compassion is about taking care of ourselves and does have a gentle quality to it, it might make us lose our edge or become weak. But the truth is just the opposite. In fact, self-compassion is widely proven to be one of the most powerful avenues toward resilience and strength. In fact, one study showed that for veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, their level of self-compassion was more strongly predictive of the likelihood of developing PTSD 1 year later than was their amount of combat exposure. That is a really astonishing finding, and such a good reminder that it isn't only about what happens to us, but how we treat ourselves around it. Also embedded in this myth is a sense of self-compassion as taking the easy route, but actually that's not true either. Self-compassion is not easy. It takes hard work, courage, and commitment. This is how Kristin Neff talks about it. She says, if you heard a new parent say, I'm going to really make every effort to be compassionate with my child when they struggle, even in moments where my impulse is to be harsh or critical or impatient, would you think, they're just taking the easy route? Nope, probably not. Plus, compassion isn't all about being soft. It can be fierce. Think of the way a mama bear protects her cubs. Love is not just a soft emotion. Myth number 3, self-compassion is self-indulgent. So some people believe that self-compassion is about being indulgent with our wants and desires. If we are compassionate towards ourselves, that means we're going to have that extra bowl of ice cream. But that's like saying a compassionate parent lets their kid eat whatever they want. But why would they do that? They care about their child and want them to be healthy. So maybe now and again, ice cream, sure, but not just because the child, or in this case ourselves, wants it. In the same way that when we care for another person, we attend to their health and encourage them to make wise choices, it seems natural that self-compassion would fuel our desire to take care of ourselves. And that's indeed what the research shows. In fact, self-compassion is linked to better health behaviors, such as exercise, a healthy diet, the ability to stop eating when full, even more frequent visits to the doctor. Self-compassion will not make you self-indulgent. Myth number 4, self-compassion is selfish. So it would be easy to think that if we were caring for ourselves, we were less focused on caring for others. But the opposite is true. In fact, people who are high in self-compassion are rated by their partners as being more giving, intimate, supportive of autonomy, and less angry. When we develop self-compassion, it is a gift to everyone, especially our children. Now, it's not true you must first love yourself before you can love someone else. The research shows that there are plenty of people who are low on self-love and yet manage to be very loving with others. You may be one of them. However, loving yourself fills up your cup so that in your service and giving to others, you don't get resentful or burnt out. By the way, if you consider yourself to be someone who has boundary issues, you might want to slow down and really take in what I just said, because self-compassion will at times mean holding a clearer boundary. But having boundaries is not selfish either, and actually provides the safety and clarity and authenticity that make true intimacy and connection possible. Myth number 5, self-compassion will make us less responsible or moral. Some people believe that self-compassion means letting ourselves off the hook. But the truth is, self-compassion makes it easier and more likely that we will take responsibility for our mistakes. That is because self-compassion makes it safe to come into self-responsibility. When we habitually self-attack, it actually means we are less likely to truly take responsibility for our mistakes because it makes those mistakes too painful and shaming to own, which leads us to ignore when we've done something wrong or even blame the other person or collapse into shame right when the other person needs us. We've all had the experience of telling someone they hurt us and then we see them go into a shame spiral about it. But it doesn't feel good to watch them do that. It doesn't help us. Right when we are needing them to do some repair work with us, they have collapsed. Now, all of us do need to have an inner monitor, that part of us that makes sure we're living up to our values and standards that we have for ourselves. But there's no reason that monitor shouldn't be kind to us. Think about this for a second. Maybe even pause this video for a moment and picture what it would feel like to have that part of you that is there making sure you're being the person you want to be. What would it feel like if it was infused with a sense of compassion and support, like a really good coach or teacher? How would that change your life? Myth number 6, self-compassion will make us less motivated. Some people believe that being kind to ourselves will make us lazy, but the opposite is true. The research shows that self-compassion is linked to more motivation. In fact, brain scans show that when people are feeling compassion, the motor cortex lights up. Compassion makes us want to act. Why? Because we care, we're invested, right? Whether in someone else's higher good or our own. Simply put, wanting the best for ourselves and therefore trying to create positive changes will take work and action. That is why self-compassion is so incredibly motivating. Additionally, self-compassion makes us less afraid of failure, which means we're more likely to take risks. Self-compassion also decreases procrastination and performance anxiety so we can perform better. In other words, when we are kind to ourselves, not only will we try harder, really show up, but actually we will have the brain state to focus and work at our optimal level. And finally, self-compassion allows us to get up in the face of failure and try again. So once again, it is linked to resilience. By the way, both love and fear can increase motivation. We can kick our butts into action, even sometimes through fairly harsh means, just in the same way you can shame and threaten a kid into trying harder in school. But that approach ultimately is not sustainable. It will backfire. Anxiety will go up, you'll become burnout or have health problems, and ultimately probably disengage. Compassion is the only way to motivate ourselves or others in a way that is healthy and sustainable, and, as we've really explored today, has absolutely no downsides. So those are the myths our culture holds around self-compassion and the most common fears around self-compassion that we run into. That being said, these are the fears that live in our more conscious mind typically, that are simply based on a misunderstanding of what self-compassion is or how it operates. But the truth is, many of us have even deeper fears around what would happen if we were kind to ourselves. Those deeper fears can be difficult to verbalize without some soul searching, and yet can be so important to dig down to and name. In the next video, I will explore the most common unconscious fears around self-compassion, ones that we are so often surprised to discover we possess. So I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, you can help me out by liking and subscribing. Or if you're a therapist who would like to train with me while earning CEUs, you can visit my website at toriolds.com.